Does anyone have any later time? You have 1:31. Being as a session and timing, we want it noted on the tape recorder that we started this exactly on time by my watch, and we finish 1 minute ahead of time by somebody else's watch. We'll determine our closing time by their watch, right? I'd like to introduce Don Beck, Massachusetts, author of several movements that we are currently using. And to my left, Nate Bliss, Arizona. And we're going to talk on timing interest. And being the moderator, I have the distinct pleasure of being able to turn to my right and say, Don, would you like to start this? And whether you do or not, would you start it?
Thank you, Dick. Dick introduced two of the panel, but he didn't introduce from Rhode Island, Dick Ledger.
I presume you were going to do that.
Thank you. We got together before this and decided we had 3 parts we wanted to present. We didn't present which order, but Dick just created that. Timing is something that is one of the critical parts of smooth square dancing, and I think one of the things that we've been looking forward to doing this panel with, or for, is the fact that even though we all agree on what timing is, we have differences of opinions on how one accomplishes that. I think some of the drastic ends are the fact that CALLERLAB has been working on a timing list for quite a while, and some of us are very much involved and enthusiastic about it, and others aren't. Suffice it to say that for a while. I think what we're going to do first is to define what it is that we feel good timing is, and it's that thing that we pretty much all agree on in principle. It'll be questioned as to maybe the other two gentlemen might want to fill in on some things I may have missed. But we feel that good timing, or timing, is the way of having it so that when dancers move through a series of sequences, a series of movements in a sequence of dance, that they are able to move smoothly from one movement to the other because they are given the commands at the proper time, so that when they're ready to do the next move, they will know what it is they're supposed to do and won't have to stop and wait for it. And also, they won't have been given that command too far in advance, so they'll have to rush through it. This is assuming that everything else is perfect, like the choreography is possible, it flows, the people that are doing it understand what they're doing, etc. And it's as simple as that you deliver the material that they have to do in time for them to do it at the right time without having to wait, or without having them to store it in their memory bank too long and try and remember, which causes the problem of rushing because they don't have confidence. We feel the best way to demonstrate more specifically what we mean is to have a square demonstrate that. So if all of you will get up, if we got a square here, we need 8 people. If 4 of them are ladies, that would be convenient. If not, it's not necessarily. We need another person. We have them. I'm not sure if that would help. That might detract me. There are an awful lot of things, as you all know, that a caller must do while calling, keeping track of the choreography and of the timing and of and if you got to keep track of knees at the same time, it just sort of detracts from some of the other things. I'm going to do this without music, despite the fact that we have a system here, because I want to just show, I want you to watch the people moving through. Okay? Let's have head square through 4 hands. Do a do-si-do. Swing through. Men run. Couples circulate. Wheel and deal. Dive through. Pass through. Alaman left. Come back and square your set. Did you notice the continuous flowing despite the rug? Did you notice that even though I hadn't intended it, there was one point of bad flow? Not bad flow, of bad timing? Before the couple circulate, yeah. Right after the men ran, there was a pause, a hesitation. It wasn't intended, but it was there, and I'll admit it. Okay? Because of timing. Because I was going to say Ferris wheel, decided I didn't want to because I don't like the flow, was going to do wheel and deal, and I stopped to think and remembered that beforehand I'd thought about couples circulating. What the heck, let's do it with music. We're going to do the same thing again. Watch for the movement. Music down. All right. Well, you're going to bow to the partner and the corner two and head to move up to the middle. Come back. You square through and it gets like that. It's four hands around you do and then do-si-do. Swing through. Men run. Hey, the couples circulate, no stop. Bend the line, right and left through. Flutter wheel. Change the figure, sorry about that. Do a star through, now dive through. You pass through and Alabama left that corner, then do-si-do your friend, square your set. Okay, that was what I think you will all agree is good timing. People were moving straight through, not stopping. Let's do something, same figure, and demonstrate what timing is like when the calls are delivered too late, when people have to stop and stand and wait. You're gonna bow to the partner, corner two, and head to go up to the middle, and come on back, and now square through. Four hands around to go, four hands around you do, and meet those two, and then you do a do-si-do. Swing through, go two by two, and when you're straight, the boys run right. Those couples circulate one place. Bend that line. You do the right and left through, and turn them on around. Flutter wheel. You gotta do it right once in a while. You got two lines, star through, hey, dive through, and then you pass through, and hey, left and to come back. Square your set. Did you see the hesitations? Did you see the problems? Did you feel them when you were dancing? I think the first thing, enough said at that point. Let's try it, the alternative. They've got it in plenty time, but too much time, and therefore dancers tend to rush because they aren't convinced that you're actually going to give them enough time. Way you bend about to the partner and the corner two, heads up to the middle, come back and now square through, four hands around you go and meet corner with a do-si-do. You're going to swing through, go two by two, and now those boys run. Couples circulate one place, bend the line and a right or left through. They're going to turn her spar through, and now dive through, pass through, left alley man. They come back and now you're going to square your set. I don't know if you noticed, hopefully you did, but the dancing wasn't quite as smooth. Same choreography, it obviously flowed. And they did have enough time because, you know, I'm stopping waiting for them now to catch up. But some of them panicked a little. They rushed in because they weren't convinced that I was really going to wait for them to give them the calls. Those are the two main problems of not delivering the music, the calls in time. One is too soon, one is too late. And then, of course, there's all sorts of combinations of the two you can drive dancers crazy with. Do you, either of you gentlemen, want to add to the definition of what good timing is? Not how we accomplish it, but what it is. the fact that calls are delivered at the right time so they can do it. You agree with that? You agree with that? Okay.
Any comments? Yeah, I must say, are there any comments from the floor? This is a music and timing interest session, first one I think they've ever tried, to bring things in perspective with what we're doing. Any comments from the square? Okay. I'll turn it back to Don.
One of the things that we noted, Dick and I and Nate, while we were talking before, over the course of the last few days, terms that came up and we quickly disposed of because they are not actually part of timing, is tempo, the difference between that and that, or even that, which is 45 RPM. Tempo says how fast the music is going, how many beats of music per minute, how fast your feet have to go with it. It does not have anything to do with how much time, how many beats of music you leave for each call, and how many beats of music you leave for pre-cueing the calls that they have to do. The other thing we discussed was phrasing, which is an important part of adding an extra good feel to music, or dancing with the phrase of the music, which is very strongly done in traditional dancing, and unfortunately not done too frequently in contemporary mainstream dancing, but can be slid in on occasion and done with it. And we won't get into what phrasing is, but we have sort of agreed there. Separate. Dick will address that later. Okay. My approach to timing, how a caller can improve his timing, how he can find... Good point. Take a break. Hey, you know, there's nothing quite as nice as an attentive audience all standing there like that, looking at you. Sorry about that.
We appreciate your consideration.
I hate to have to editorialize like that. The approach that I have found most successful to teach me how to successfully time, and I had tried a number of others because I was aware that what timing was and what I wanted to see happen, but I couldn't make it happen. And the approach that I have used in teaching others, and I have seen other people teach others with, and work successfully, is something, a term that I first heard Burl Main use about 10 or 11 years ago, called sight timing, which means, as sight calling resolves choreography by feedback of what you see on the floor, sight timing says you set your timing by the feedback of what you see on the floor. You watch and you adjust accordingly. Now, you people saw, and some of you felt, the difference between good timing and various forms of bad timing. In order to improve those bad timing, when you are calling, you have to watch that. When there is a hesitation, when there is a glitch in their movements, there can be any one of many, many reasons that causes that glitch. Poor flow, people don't know the call, etc. But one of those things is timing, and if you identify it as timing, let's say the stop and go, this means that you've delivered the call too late for that particular group to respond to it in time to do it. Generally, we consider delivering it about 2 beats before they actually need it as being the right amount of time. Unfortunately, with some groups that varies. Sometimes with newer dancers, they need a little more reaction time, response time. You may have to deliver it slightly sooner. You may have to slow the tempo down, which gives them a few split seconds, hundredths of a second to more reaction time. But whatever it is, for that particular group, you may have to adjust for the carpeting, for the slippery floors. You have to watch that the timing that the people move as what we define as good timing. And if they start to lag behind, you have to adjust. And by working with this, just a feedback of what's going on, you'll find that you can accomplish good timing if you're continually aware of it, particularly of the problems. I was looking for lists of how many calls per beat when I started calling. CALLERLAB hadn't done their tedious work at that time, and I found 2 or 3 places, but most of that gave 1 or 2 calls. Most of the people that I asked said, gee, I don't know, I just do it when I think it's right. I found in later years, and I feel strongly now, that if I had that list that CALLERLAB has now created, and if I had it memorized cold so I wouldn't have to look up each call and look for the numbers, that I would find it totally useless to use. And I hate to say that with CALLERLAB having put as much effort into it as we have, Dick in particular, and some of you people here. I think it's an interesting academic exercise and almost maybe useful for writing some singing call figures. Almost, because of not fitting the phrase of the music and not sounding good with the music. But as far as calling, as I say, if I knew that list, if I knew it was perfect, and if I knew in my head, had it totally memorized, with all the other things I have to do while I'm calling, there is no way I could count how many beats each call was going to take while I was doing the other things. And then 2 beats before that call ended, call the next call. And I found that sight timing, or learning how to recognize what's good and adjusting accordingly, is the way that seems to work for me and for those that I've seen taught, both beginners and more experienced callers. Dick, it's yours.
Okay, Don. We agree in many, many areas, believe me. At this point, Nate, I'm sure you've just been, I see your feet have been moving up and down, so you're about ready to get it going. And I'd like to introduce Nate Bliss. Take over the next portion.
Thank you, Dick. Okay, Don has covered a little bit on sight timing, and we all basically understand various principles of timing. I think Dick is going to work pretty much into the memorized timing, so I thought that I might cover a subject of what I call naturalized timing. Naturalized timing is the timing that you feel as a dancer, even though you're on this side of the mic. For instance, I don't have to be looking at the square. I am actually in the square in my own mind. And this is what I call naturalized timing. I feel, and as I look at the floor, going again to sight timing, that I've got to fall off the edge of the stage if they're not there right now. The next call must be here to keep the flow of the dance going. But because of something that happened in a square over on this corner or that corner or wherever they happen to be, you kind of almost fall on your head trying to say, get there. You know, because even without seeing them, you should be able to feel naturalized timing as a dancer yourself. In other words, turn your back to the audience and you should be able to feel when they are there. It's kind of like the mental image type calling. You're not only following a dancer in your head, you're also him or her or whoever it happens to be that's in action. Would you like a demonstration on something like that?
Yes, that's you. This is your baby.
Oh.
I'm ready to.
Would you like to dance?
Sure.
Oh, you want to dance?
Sure. I don't get this opportunity.
You don't have long enough hair. Dick needs some help there.
I'll be your partner.
I was afraid of that.
Yeah. the thing that we're discussing here actually is running your timing along with the type of calling you're doing. In other words, if you're using cue cards, you may want to have it programmed on your cue card to where your timing is. If you're sight calling, you're probably going to sight time because they work hand in hand. If you're mental image calling, then mentally you should be able to feel the timing inside as you're calling. In other words, without even seeing people, you should be able to feel it. I'm not a very good mental image caller, but what was that figure you used? Do you want to do that one again? You're asking for it. Okay, yeah, we want to keep this to something that we understand of teaching mostly. Eight bow to the partner, corner two, circle to the left, all eight of you, circle to the left, around the ring, and then about halfway, left man, the corner, then go right or left, grand, go right and a left, around, you beat your own and promenade your honey, go down, right back home around the hall. When you're there, let's have the head two couples, move up to the middle and you come right back, square through and you get about four hands around, you do, and then do a do with the outside two. Everybody swing through right there, and then boy run, couples circulate. When you get there now, wheel and deal, face that pair with a right or left through, turn that girl square through, count 3/4. Trade by, and there you find the corner, left man, the corner girl, and then right back home, say whoa. Okay, now in this case, I don't know. You'll have to tell me, whether it flowed smoothly or not, because I didn't see what you were doing. You might have been just standing at home the whole time, as far as I'm concerned. But this is something that as a dancer yourself, you must be able to feel from this side of the mic. Now, had somebody made a mistake out there, the timing would have gone on. And I'd have probably ended up several counts ahead of the floor. And this perhaps would be maybe an advocate towards sight timing, but this again depends on whether we're talking about a festival of well-experienced dancers or a beginner's class of first-night people. To actually walk through a particular call will probably take 2 or 4 counts longer than they actually would go through it as they dance it. The beginners especially, you're always watching the slowest square on the floor to set your sight timing. But if you went to what we might call a mental image timing, they would probably be standing the whole tip. Go ahead.
You were dancing it, you were watching it, you weren't. But with what I had you looking for sight timing, what we were looking at, the definition of timings, did you find any shortcomings, any problems? I agree. What we're showing is that we're accomplishing the same thing in a totally different way. I saw a slight glitch. I'm not going to say anything about it. Yes.
That's why I call it naturalized timing.
I was going to...
For one reason. Mm-hmm. That could possibly happen over a period of time, but again, if a person that's on this side of the mic is not a smooth dancer, for instance, if I were watching someone who is a caller dancing in a square, and he is not a smooth dancer, I would just about give you odds 10 to 1 that that's the way he calls, not smooth. And timing relates very much to smoothness. how smoothly someone will flow from one call to the other as they maneuver through these calls. And right now, we're only basically showing various methods of timing.
Nate, I observed that both you and Don, in delivering your calls, get them to us at the very last instant before we need them, with one exception, and that one exception was the promenade. That call came to us about 4 weeks before we needed it, but all the others arrived within the last 2 beats.
Right.
I also noticed that a lot of callers do not observe that convention. We call it a convention. They don't call to us quite far before we need them. Let's ignore the ones they're late.
I don't have a copy of CALLERLAB's list here. You got Dick? Is the timing list here somewhere?
Too soon. And if they naturalize that way of calling, then it's embedded in them forever, and it's very hard to do.
No, just the timing list. I don't have it in here.
I'd like to point out that Nate, we spoke about it briefly before, the naturalizing that you get, part of it is mentally dancing. Part of it is just, I'm sure, from lots of sight timing, and that embeds itself in, and you learn from that method too. Part of it could be from pre-programming if you've mastered that. But all that sort of blends into a natural, instinctive way of doing it. And hopefully what Jim is pointing out, that what naturalizes within you is good timing rather than bad timing. The other one,
I think the point that Jim is trying to make, as far as smoothness of dance, giving a command too soon gives the dancer the tendency to rush because they're not there yet. There's nothing wrong with borrowing timing from another movement, as long as you give it back to them when you get to that movement. For instance, in singing calls, it's done by the hundreds. Weave the ring and meet the girl in promenade, or do-si-do in promenade, and we're saying it before they get to the third person. What do beginners do? They take the third person in promenade, because you have given that command too far in advance to make it feel smoothly for them to finish that call. And the idea of giving your choreography and timing together, you try to, of course now I'm getting into Dick's portion of this thing on memory timing, but you try to give your command in the first 2 beats that you're allowing for that command. Head square through. 2, 2. And that first 2 beats. And then, no matter what your timing is for that, the next command should be in the first 2 beats of the next call. If you have to, because of phrasing or some other thing, back it up a couple. Never back it up any more than 4, because now they're going to rush the last few steps. Even if they didn't intend to, they think they're not going to get there in time. And I noticed that happen when Don was showing an example of poor timing. He called a do-si-do with a corner when they were on the second hand of the square through. He did give them back the timing when they got around to doing the do-si-do, but they had a tendency to rush at that point, slow down when they found out that they had time to do the do-si-do, then into the swing through, and the boys' run command came quick, so they rushed through the swing through, slowed down when they found out they had time for the boys' run. And this is the thing we're trying to avoid with smooth timing. For instance, okay, yeah, just a second. Where you give your commands for your timing is very important. Even though you're allowing enough time for each call, the command should only be at the beginning of each call. Okay? Let's have the heads square through. Do-si-do with a corner, girl, when you get there now, all the way around. Now, right about there, they should have been trying to rush, right? Swing through. But these guys are good enough dancers, they wouldn't do that. Boy, run. Couples circulate. Do a wheel and deal right there, and then pass to the center, and the center is pass. Left Alabama, left, and then you get again, the dancers will adjust bad timing for you. Thank God that they do. You know, within limits, right. So, you notice where I gave the command for the do-so-do there? The normal floor would probably immediately take off and go 90 miles an hour through that square through because they just heard the do-so-do. But for their sake, it should not have been there. Well, it depends on the level of the dancer. If we're talking the newer dancer, they're going to do it right now. They'll get through the second hand and do-so-do with the right hand lady. Yeah. Okay. Now, one of the things that I wanted to point out while I'm still here before Dick goes into the memory timing is basically how to figure out timing. If you're just sitting at home trying to figure it out, okay? Basically, it takes 2 steps for each hand that you use, or each person you pass. But this also presents a little bit of a problem in that every time you do 3 2-count calls in a row, you have an overlap in timing of another 2 counts. Okay? Because somewhere between that second and third 2-count call, you end up with an overlap. That's why square through, because it's 4 hands, we say that should be 8 counts. There's 2 counts for each hand. But by the time you get to the third hand, you fall into that overlap situation where you got to add 2 more. Okay? If I said, in fact, to show you why it comes out, square through comes out to 10 rather than 8, is this. When they do the right hand pull by, you'll notice that the boys are on the outside. And when they quarter in and go to the left hand pull by, the boys are on the inside. When they turn again and do the right pull by, they're on the outside. And girls on the vice versa places. Okay? We get 2 steps on the first hand, but because the guys are really not walking in a square, they're walking in a rectangle. They have to go 3 steps on the second hand to get to the outside for the next turn. We do that twice, we end up with a whole square through, makes 10. Right? 2 steps on the first hand, 3 on the second hand. This I learned from teaching blind people. And if you really want to learn how to time calls, try working with blind people. They can't learn anything other than how many steps and how far to go. And working with the Braille Institute really taught me a lot. Teaching a basic class took 2 years to get them through mainstream. But they were very proud that they could do teacup chains. But I'll show you. Huh? No, we had one square that became an exhibition group. Notice that if we were doing it with the music, it would show better. Start your square through. Go by 1 hand. Okay, that's about 2 steps there. Now we got our quarter in. And notice that the guys now have to go 3. The girls went 3 on that first one. Okay? To get to the outside, the guys went 3 more steps. Okay? Now another right hand. The guys go 2 and the girls go 3. And then another left. And that would be a total of 10 steps to get there. Right? Okay? Now, square your set again. Here is an example of using groups of 2-count calls. What I call 2-count calls. I'm not sure. I didn't find them on a list here. What does the list say? Where's star through? What does it say, Dick? 4? Okay. Excuse me. There are 2 in my book. Okay. Actual dance timing. Okay, it takes 4 steps to walk through a star through. Start to stop. Okay, show me a star through. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Had I called a star through with the music going, they would have stopped here before I call the next call. Right? Pass through. 1, 2, Okay? Star through. 1, 2, 3.5. Slide through. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pass through. Trade by. Element left. Now, from the squared position, it may take them 4 to get the first star through because they're further apart. Once they're moving, they won't because they're already in motion. To pick up what's going on out here. You find it? Four from point of contact. Okay? Make your point of contact. Star through. I think that'd be more like 2 with music. Okay. Okay, square your set. What I'm basically trying to show here is why we have an overlap in timing. Okay? Basically, I want to figure out timing for yourself. Okay? With each pass or each hand pull by, you can figure 2 counts. When you add 3 of them together, you get 6 because of the overlap in timing. That little sequence that I just used with the star through, pass through, star through, slide through, pass through, trade by are all 2 count calls in my book. Okay? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 2 count calls. That should be what, 12? What should it be? And the 6th one. For each 3, there should be 16 for that complete sequence. Okay? Yeah, 8 chain 2 is a perfect example. Each hand is 2, every 3 you add 2. Does that make any sense? Okay. This is not something that I just found to be, honest with you, this was passed on to me by a gentleman that a lot of you know, some of you never heard of, but Mr. Ed Gilmore passed all this stuff on to me that I'm passing on to you right now. Okay? Now, don't do this just now, okay? If I were to call these as 2 count calls, they would sound something like this. Now, don't do it. Just listen. Okay? Well, if it's star 2, pass 2, star 2, slide 2, pass 2, trade, 5 to the left, element with a corner again. Okay, this time you can do it. Okay, watch how far they get behind me. Should be about 4 counts behind me by the time I get to the corner because of the 2 overlaps. Well, hit star 2, pass 2, then slide 2, and star 2, pass 2, and trade, 5 to the corner, left element, corner with a halt. Back home to the... Now, if I allow 2 extra counts at the point of that 3rd 2 count call and the 6th one, that time I had to leave 4 at the end in order to get them there. For their smoothness, if I put it where it belongs at the end of 3 and also at the end of 6, it should not be quite as bad. I know that 4 is bad, isn't it? Okay. Okay, let's have the hit, star 2, pass 2, and slide 2. 1, 2. Slide 2, pass 2, trade by 1, 2, element, left for the corner, girl, and it gets back home. Now, I don't know, as a dancer, would that feel a little better? Okay? Use exactly the same stuff, except leaving those overlap 2 counts after the 3rd one and the 6th one. So there is no hard and fast rule as far as dancing goes as to where the timing lies. We can generalize, for instance, dive through. There's no hard and fast rule that says dive through is X number of counts. Okay? Yeah. From this standpoint of those moving, right, this makes a very good rule to follow, but there are even times when that doesn't work based on something else that happens in the square. Good dancers, okay, staying with the music, following the commands, perhaps will do these things nice and smoothly.
But again, you may have to adjust that overlap for the sake of the newer dancers, or if you've got challenge dancers at your mainstream dance, and that's all that's there, you may have to adjust it the other direction. You may just go ahead and take off a couple, because they're so used to things being done like this. I mean, the star through is one count for them. How many? 16. Did I give 18? Well, had I waited any longer, see, I left. You heard me give the 1-2 overlaps. Okay, the commands I gave were on 2 beats, 2 of them in a row, count 2, 2 more in a row, or 3 more in a row, I should say. Count 2, and there's where we should be. Once more. Yes. Okay. This is where I'm actually infringing on Dick's portion of this thing, memorize timing. Okay? But when we were discussing it, what I'm trying to show here is how to figure timing when you don't have anybody to figure it with. You're sitting at home trying to write out something because somebody put walk and dodge, partner trade, follow your neighbor, and spread in a singing call, and you don't want to use it that way. And you're trying to change that, so you're working your timing out on a new figure for a singing call or something.
Nate, when you did the naturalized timing, were you, in fact, doing this calculating in your head and leaving that many beats per minute? Does that answer your question? Okay, let me point out that when he did the naturalized timing...
What I was doing was over here dancing.
When he did the naturalized timing that he...
Yeah, forward and back 6.
You can then give us that first star through on 7, 8 of 9.
Okay. It's forward up to the middle and you come right back. You do star through, then pass through and a right or left through. I missed it. Dive. Star through, you're home. Okay. It's forward up to the middle and back. You do star through, pass through, star through with the outside 2. 1, 2, slide through, pass through, trade by 1, 2, Allemande left for the corner, curl and then back home, say whoa. Yes. Now, first of all, you got to remember, folks, the dancer starts 2 counts behind the first call. Right? If you give the command on 7 and 8, they're going to start on 1 and 2. Yeah. Well, on 1 and 2. Okay. I don't do anything on ones. Okay. The 8 chain through that you mentioned. Okay. It's 8 hands. Oh, this also applies to any kind of calls that you do. For instance, let's go to relay the deucey. How many counts is that?
20. I learned this today. I called it.
I would say just basically figuring it out in my head, 16 for dance timing. Okay, because of the number of overlaps that you would have there. The 8 chain through, for instance, you got 8 hands, 2 counts for each hand, tells me that should be 16 plus how many overlaps? There's 1 at 3, there's 1 at 6. Okay, so you got 4 counts, which now gives you 20 counts for an 8 chain through for dance timing because of the overlap. We have a question. Would you go ahead?
We had a
Yes. I was allowing 6 so that I could get them on a 7 and 8 for the command. My command was given on 7 and 8 so they could start on 1 and 2. You know what I'm saying? But if I did that, they would stop for 2 because I gave them the command on the first 2 counts that they're going to use. They actually took 8 to go forward and back. Okay? My command was on 7 and 8 so they didn't have to stop at the end. From then on, I stayed those 2 counts ahead of them all the time. If you understand what I'm saying. If I said forward and back and allowed them 8 and then gave them the command on 1 and 2, they don't start till 3 and 4. Because now I'm giving them a total of 10. Well, from what I'm saying, the caller's timing on that is 6. You know, if you understand what I'm saying, mine is 6 because if I wait 8, then now they have finished the call and stopped. And what we're trying to accomplish in timing is to smoothly move them.
May I just interrupt? I think you're talking 2 different things about when to give the call and when it's executed. Okay, he believes that forward and back is an 8, but he's trying to say he's given the call on 7 and 8, but they haven't gone forward yet. Okay, so there's 2 different things there. There's one of actually doing it, and one of when you put the call in so that they can do it, right? On 1.
Right. The dancer doesn't start as soon as you say it. When I say go forward and back, they don't go forward until I've already said forward and back. They're starting there. So when it gets up to 7 and 8, I'm giving them the next command while they're coming back the last 2 steps, if that makes any sense. They're still taking 8. I'm allowing 6 because I've got to give them the next command before they stop. And what we're talking about is smooth timing is flow of the dance. Let me do it that way. Yeah, well, once you get, that is only a starter thing, you know, to get them going anyway. Heads forward, up to the middle and back. Star through. Notice the stop right there? Okay. Now, I allowed the full 8, gave the command star through on the 1 and 2 where I wanted them to start. But they couldn't start because, unstar through. They couldn't start because they didn't know what I wanted them to do. And even if I allow 6 for my timing, that takes them 8. Because my next command now goes on the last 2 so that they don't stop before they go on to the next call. Does that answer your question at all? No? Okay. It's your turn.
I think that was very nice. I enjoyed that. It's good to get different approaches. I think it's apparent to everybody here that we all agree on what we're trying to do and what we are accomplishing. Good night. What we're trying to do, what we're trying to promote, what we believe in, the smoothest. We have probably just minor differences of how to attain this. I'm going to direct my approach to the new caller. Basically, the new caller. Many callers start out practicing. Many go to schools, and they're told, well, look, you have to practice your timing. How do you do it? Okay, this is a timing interest session. And to create this interest, every form of dance that's known to man is instinctive to start on number 1 with a heavy phrase beat of music. If you're doing a round dance, if you feel and have any ecstatic feeling in the dance itself, you would never dream of dancing around all the way through where you have absolutely no help from the music. If you're going to dance a round dance to this particular record, which incidentally can be done, okay, you would have to start there. If you started anywhere else, it just wouldn't feel right. Or you start there. That heavy beat is what wants to move your feet. One. And if you're going to call heads, right on that two. One. You're giving that one beat back to the dancer, same lady's chain. They're moving on one. Sides, do the right on that two. They're executing on one. Same lady's chain across. I can talk to you at the same time and I could all praise. All circle to the left. Because I trained myself, you're calling a swing. I trained myself to deal with the music. Promenade one. The music tells me they're halfway around. Not watching them dance. I know they are. Heads right on that two. One. Okay, same lady's chain. One. It's very simple. Sides right on that two. It's got to become an instinct. Both these gentlemen have the same lady's chain. They have the instinct. They deal with more material. All circle left. I like to keep it simple. I like to keep it on the music. Corner swing. You clap your hands on a phrase of the beat, you'll know that those calls promenade come just before one. Clap your hands on one. Try it. Right? Let's try something else. Heads. Promenade. Halfway. Sides. With the right on that two. One. Let's see if they clap on that phrase, okay? Side couple square two. I didn't hear it, but the outside too. Dose it out. Do an 8 chain 4. With number 5 you swing. We had 2 or 3 claps there, right? And promenade. Okay, sure. Now, would you like to try to get the feel of this type of thing? Could we impose on our very few women and a lot of men to make a square and do this type of thing? Okay? Yes, question. Exactly. The music, you know, the music that we use is telling us so many things that we have been ignoring. I don't mean that we ignore it instinctively, but that we are so busy doing other things that we haven't been concentrating on this type of thing. By the way, Nate, he makes a very good partner. Okay. Now, what do we do? Lose one? 1 out of 4? Oh, okay, I'll see. Now, it's that we don't have very many pickup notes, so I'll just say heads right on that too. Same lady's chain across. Really, I don't have to watch them do this. Sides. Do they right on that too? They're always moving on one. Same lady's chain across. If they're not, I'm going to let them wait for me. All join hands, circle out. Because I don't care if they're not there, you know, corner swing. I don't care if they're rushing or waiting. Promenade around the ring. Talk to the girl. Sometimes that slows them down. Okay? And then we can say, heads, promenade outside. Halfway around to go. 4 ladies ready to change. 4 ladies change across the sides. All right on that two, right straight across. But all join hands, circle to the left. They're always moving on one. With the corner ladies swinging, I'm deliberately holding this next call back to the last minute. Because I want to control them. And promenade with the girl, you just want promenade. Because 1 beat, 2 beat, we're not going to argue about it. Okay? Sides this time, promenade exactly halfway. And ahead, right on the two, right straight across. The same 4 square, 2, 4 hands, let's keep it smooth. With the outside, here goes side, oh, now everybody's moving. middle and do-si-do. See if we can pick up a split phrase, huh? Right-hand star in the middle and turn it, go to the corner. Allemande left with the corner. Home you go, do-si-do. Now reach and take your corner promenade. Now, we're not going to cheat anybody. Did anybody know where the split phrase was there? You want to see it again? With the side ladies? Side ladies change. If they're not dancing, I'm not going to give it the sides forward. Make sure you come back. Pass through and separate around one. Walk into the middle and do-si-do. Same four with the right hand star. Here's 7, 8, 1, 2. Allemande left. Get home and do-si-do. There's no other way they can get that call. Take your corner. Promenade. There's no way they can make a mistake unless they're absolutely trying to make a mistake. And that's the whole idea of what we're doing. Okay. As I said before, this, to me, if a person is starting to call, I think that this is the area that this type of thing can really set him on the right track so that he can do what Don does. But Don has years of experience. So he can do what Nate does. But Nate has years of experience. But this will develop his instinct, and really, you've mentioned that 2 or 3 times, whether you call it naturalization in calling. It gives him something to sink his teeth into. Now he can go down in his cellar and actually practice timing. He can start to drill himself on what becomes instinct. And there are many other things you can do, depending on what the movement in the square. You can make people move on number 1. But if you call it on number 3, number 4 is an awful funny beat to try to move on. Have you ever tried to move on beat number 2, number 4, number 3? It does not have the feeling that number 1 and number 5 have. So instinctively, these gentlemen have developed this timing through years of watching people, of believing in smooth dancing. Okay? The only difference is I like to move them on number 1. We have a comment. Right?
I don't know if you use balance very much in ocean waves. That's one place that I found that is not comfortable. Start a do-si-do on 1 balance.
Right. Yeah, well, see, if you follow it, now you can add up your square through from a static square, okay, and get to the corner and do-si-do. You can hit that balance. Okay, you can step in by leading your path. You can make them balance. Would you like to try it? Okay, would you like to try it?
What I'm saying is starting the command do-si-do so that they start on 1.
No, you can't do it. It has to follow something. Yeah, it has to follow something. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. You could do it. You could do a do-si-do from the head positions. Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll just drop the record now. We'll pick up the phrase, right? Heads forward and back. Square through 4. With the outside pair of do-si-do, everybody has to move. Rock into an ocean wave and balance. Okay. A little sloppy, but that was all right. Let's get back home again. Okay. Now I'm going to try to move you, okay? And the heads forward to the middle and back. Same 4, square through, move. 4 hands around in the middle of the floor. With the outside 2, do-si-do, everybody move. Step into your wave, let's see it now, hit it, rock it. Okay, now, that felt better. See what I mean? You can move people and get them there and let the music dictate when they're going to balance. What's happened to the balance in the last several years is too many callers have said, balance, swing through. And you either have to do one or the other. But if he says balance just before, and you balance, swing through is where it belongs, on the back balance. Otherwise, you want to get this before the next call. It's got to be, that is one of the places that has to be danced. We've kind of murdered Alamo style, okay? But would you people do something just as a demonstration because we're talking about timing interests of where Alamo style has gone downhill. All right? Now, I'm going to call this on number 1. When you get to your partner, you're going to balance forward and back. And please do it. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to turn to the right halfway. Okay? You're going to all join hands again. Let's get the hands up so we have a little flexibility, and we're going to balance on the heavy beat of music. Okay? And each turn, 4 steps. Let's do a dancing step. And I'm going to start this on number 1. All right? Simply because 66 out the Alamo. Alamo style on the right to your partner. Balance. Hit it. Turn by the right halfway. Ready? Hit it. Turn by the left halfway. Hit it. Turn by the right halfway. And hit it. Now turn by the left. Bring it right in the left. Not what I'm looking for. Not what I'm looking for. Because of the execution. Dose to dose. Then back to the corner. Do it. Alamo. Not Alamo style on the right to your partner. Balance. Now turn. Knock together. Balance. We're not taking 4 counts for our turn. You are, but the others aren't. Okay, let's square them up. See, some of us are taking our 4-count turns, and others are not taking 4 counts. You're going bang, bang. Okay? Let's take our 4 counts on the turn. Dance painfully, right? Alamo style. That's it. You can feel the phrase, can't you? Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2. Brand right in the left, go right in the left. Brand. There's no hesitation there. When you meet your lady, dose of them, and balance the money right there. Okay. Now, what happened, and the reason you people find it so difficult is because we swing through with the Alamo style. And you swing through 6 counts, you split the phrase, and then it becomes a nothing. Okay? Do you all understand what I'm talking about? You start that turn on number 1 or number 5, and you're going to end up by trying to balance on number 3. It is not a balanced step. It is not a balanced beat. 1 is a balanced beat. 5 is a balanced beat. But by using so many swing throughs with the Alamo style, we've killed the original Alamo style, which is what we were just trying to do then. Okay? Could you do it just one more time for me? Let's see if we would just, by concentrating a little bit, see if we would kind of hit that a little bit better, right? I mean, we don't have to worry about what we're doing. We're going to worry about how well we do what we do, right? Alamo, watch this. You can feel the phrase hit it. 2, 3, 4. 3, 4. That's what I'm looking for. Weave the ring, weave it in and out of the ring. And bow to your partner. Congratulate your corner. And I think you got the idea. Okay, now that was what I was looking for. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. But we've killed that by adding the other. Because it's just in exactly the same way, in exactly the same way that we've really killed the ocean wave balance by the use of rocket swing through. Then dancers get caught in the middle of it, and they have to do one or the other, but they can't do both at the same time. Many of your lines going forward and back, and you hear this, and when I hear it, I know somebody is being cheated, but you'll hear heads, if you will, okay? Let's lead to the right head, circle up 4, okay? Now take your time to make a straight line, ready? Forward into the middle and down. Now pass through, and the wheel and deal, and a double pass through. First couple go left, the next one right, a square through, count forward, 1. And I know exactly where you're going to meet that corner. Swing to the corner, okay? Then keep this girl and you promenade on. In New England, we usually swing a little longer than that, right? Okay, now I've heard the same thing done this way. Heads lead to the right, circle up 4. You break to a line and forward, up and back and pass through. You see what I mean? Okay, this you made a kind of a waiting type of motion and a hesitation, and this is what we're doing to dancers by, let's face it, rotten timing. And this is really what we're trying to get away from. Exactly. Dancers, I think, in the last few years have been trying to protect themselves, but they really shouldn't have to. If we put the concentration back into our training program, so that it's too late for those of us that are already in the movement, I feel. We can always improve. But I think mainly it's this type of thing gives a newer caller something to sink his teeth in and something to practice on. Okay, thank you so much, Square, okay? We have some comments. We welcome comments now. We have just a few minutes to kind of address your comments to any one of us, all right? And if you have any questions, we'll give you some snappy answers. They may not be right, but at least they'll be snappy. Comment. Could you come up and use the mic, because this is on tape recorder, and then maybe the rest of them might want to hear you.
Yeah, Dennis Farrar from Phoenix, Arizona. I'd just like to mention one comment. Communication is a big factor in this, too, I feel, because there may be a caller out there that may have the same problem that you have. If you have a particular problem in your timing, talk to other callers about it. Exchange your ideas, because there may be another caller that has the same problem. So communicate with each other and share your ideas. And that's what it's all about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comment. Any other comments?
I have
Done? Okay.
I have a question. First of all, let me point out that I'm pretty much tied to sight timing. Dick, I think, is pretty much tied to pre-programmed timing. Nate is a very versatile fellow, and I think uses all three and chose to work with the naturalized because that was the one that neither of us claimed to talk about. But I think has strong feelings about the other two, positive in each in its own case. Now, I have a question for Dick. Let's say I am coaching a caller. He's been calling for quite a while. He does quite a bit of choreography. He's not a beginner by any sense of the word. It's too late, I feel, to go back and have him drop back to right and left throughs and ladies' chains. But his timing is poor. How would you go about, or what do you suggest that I do to him to help him improve his timing at that point?
Okay. I get this question all the time with the schools that I run. My schools are probably the only ones. Elsie's been calling for 100 years. She came to my school just to observe because she is a tremendously firm believer in what we are trying to promote. To answer your question, I must answer the question that I get from callers writing in about the school. And I get this all the time. They say, I'm an experienced caller. I've been calling for 9 years. I've been calling for 10 years. Do you have any advanced timing? And you see, the answer is very simple. There is no such thing as advanced timing. There is only basic timing that carries through by instinct through advanced material.
Let me be the caller asking the question. I call advanced level choreography regularly. I think I have a clue as to what timing is and what there isn't. And I've seen some advanced callers call, and everybody flows smoothly through from one thing to the other, just like the three gentlemen on the panel told me it should with their demonstrations. Then I've seen others that call where the dancers have to stop and go. And I know they get more tired, etc. And I would like to have my timing come out in my advanced choreography like that. I know I'd like to have it fall in the phrase of the music, but the important thing to my dancers is the choreography. Therefore, I can't drop back to the phrase every time and hit it as regularly as you are. But will you still agree that even with impossibly hitting the phrase, that I can have either good timing or bad timing, that it either can flow or it can't? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I can't seem to make it happen good. Can you help me make it good? What approach do I take?
Okay. The approach that I think you must take is getting right back to basics, being able to hit these little drills in your own, with the phrase on the record.
But I can't extend that to the advanced choreography on time.
Let me finish.
Time properly.
Let me finish. Okay? Now, the question was asked, and I have to go back to basic timing. What we really try to do is to make this an instinct so that you don't have to count. And if you have enough things that you hit, say 9 out of 10 times, you know, at first the percentage is low. It's like anything else. You're lucky to hit it 3 out of 10 times. Pretty soon you start approaching 4 out of 10 times. To make a long story short, your odds go up. Now you start hitting it by instinct. Things like heads promenade half. Things that are perfectly phrased, you know they're going to take 8 counts. All right, we're dealing in 8s. We're dealing in 4s. Swing through, we're dealing with a 6.
My advanced choreography doesn't deal in even numbers. 3, 7, 12 and a half.
You still have to go back to basic timing in order to develop the other timing. You have it. I don't see why you know, if you were calling the way that square moved, and that's the way you call, I say you don't need it. You've already had enough experience to have it through instinct. You have an instinct.
No, I do.
Yeah.
And I do it with sight timing. But I'm trying to listen to your side of your type of timing and maybe teach that to callers also. Okay.
All right.
I do it, but I do it with sight timing. And
Okay.
I want to, but I'm acting as a devil's advocate, as a student that doesn't have it, but recognizes it exists. And I'm asking a panel, and I've asked this guy, and he says sight timing, and I'm about to ask this guy who has 3 things in his hand.
Okay.
And you're telling me not to do advanced choreography.
Would I be remiss in, we're running out of time, okay? Would I be remiss in saying a caller learning to call has no business moving people through just to do the figures and to do the, he has no business calling spin chain of gears if he doesn't know how to call circle left and do it unframed.
But I'm talking about, we have 500-600 callers here at this convention, and I think you and I might sarcastically agree that 300 of them don't have proper timing. I'm being generous, okay? They don't have proper timing, but I'm not saying they're beginner callers. I'm saying most of them are established, and I want to help them to improve their timing at what they do. And I can't tell them to go back and call phrase right and left throughs.
They should all be here.
I know. Unfortunately, we got
This type of a thing is, we can't go back 20 years and do what we're doing now. We have to start somewhere. And this, it may be too late. What happens with a caller already in the field who has all of this experience, who hasn't had training in finding the phrase of that music, moving people, knowing where they are, and dancing them through so they're hitting it all the time? If he hasn't had that training, he's developed so many bad habits by now, it's impossible almost to help him.
Are you saying that as a call-out committee on timing, we should abandon those 500
Absolutely
callers we
not,
have now?
because that was just a starting point. Mickey?
Yes, I wanted to mention that. They're not going to go back to doing a right and left through and a lazy thing. But you can start learning this time and complete your class and build it up that way and slowly develop it into your book.
How do I know when my timing's right or not?
When you...
I don't.
Well, there's a list.
I can't count that list and call at the same time to double-check myself.
You practice at home. You practice at home. If it takes so many steps to do a square through 4 hands, it takes 10 steps. And you practice a little bit. Then try it with your class. Or a lady.
Practice counting?
When you first figure out what you're going to call and how many steps it takes to do each of these things.
I have to ad-lib choreography or my dancer's in a rut.
This is a class I'm talking about.
I know. I have to teach my class not to anticipate what's coming.
Right.
And therefore I have to ad-lib my choreography at my class. I can't pre-plan 2 hours, 3 hours of work. Not that closely. So that I
You can do a couple of dances each week to help in your timing. Just a couple of dances each week.
I want my timing to be good all the time.
Well,
How can I tell?
You can't do it all in one night. It's going to take time. You can't do it all in one night. You're learning timing. You can only do so many dances each time you do it. And then you can do it more dances, more dances, more dances.
May I suggest with sight timing you can do it from the beginning with all of it?
Then you don't need any help. Yeah, I know what you mean.
No, but we're presenting two sides, and you're more eloquently presenting your side. But I want people to be aware of the possible difficulties with it, because I strongly feel there are some, that it's too limited.
You don't have a problem. I think that you could work with people if they could develop what you're doing. Fine. People are dancing. They're not just running through things. Yes.
The way you do it, and I don't think very many people can do it that way. I think you have to have a background of traditional calling contra that you have, and maybe to take a brand new caller that doesn't do anything else, it would be an excellent idea. But Western style square dancing, I'm surprised that you can make it fit into Western style square dancing like you do. I don't know anybody else who can. I would love to do it, but
it's possible.
Here's a guy that does a good job of timing and does a lot of Western style square dancing. I don't think you can do it, Tom Canyon, the way Dick does.
I don't hit the phrase as often as he does because I have a choreography that doesn't allow it.
Yeah.
But I am aware of it, and we'll throw an extra
Right.
back
Yeah.
and swing.
You still do some of it, so
I'm aware of phrasing, and I use it when I can.
But
it doesn't govern. It's secondary.
secondary.
The timing is primary. The choreography is very close to it, one or the other.
But
Phrasing is secondary.
I think it does account. Background is part of it, and an awful lot of Western style calling, modern square calling. I've never heard the term phrase.
What I'm trying to do is develop a way of making them more aware of both the timing and eventually the phrasing, so they can do what they're doing with a slightly better ability, so that the floors will enjoy their dancing a little bit better. Still doing their thing, but being able to do it better.
Just to, Bob, just for that gentleman from Wisconsin, I didn't get your first name. Howard. Okay. Howard, this, as you mentioned, growing up with the traditional dancing, I've always had the opinion, if any of you were in the Contra Hall last night, this is what I call high-level dancing. I always have. Number one, it was a perfect marriage between musical phrasing, musical execution, and dancing. It was a perfect marriage. Anybody that went into that hall got really an electric feeling out of seeing perfection. Now, this perfection is developed over a good number of years by people last night who were dancing this for the first time, and many in there over a good number of years who have been dancing this for years. But everybody caught onto it, and there was one thing dictating what they did with their hands and feet, and that was the music. And the calls have to be just prior to that phrase. If any of you were there, you'd know exactly what I'm saying. You had to dance it to experience it. You had to hear it to experience it. Bob, I believe, was next.
Could you use this microphone? This one's on tape. The other one.
Oh, okay. It's been so long I forgot what I was going to say now. Okay, I'm Bob Code from New York, and I wanted to answer Don's question, I think. I had the same problem that you were expressing. I am calling mainstream +2, a little bit of advanced here and there, and it's hard to use this kind of phrasing and to do it. But I think any caller, I don't care how many years of experience they have, if they ever want to check their timing, a simple little gadget like a tape recorder is fine. And once they dance to themselves, after they've called 3 or 4 years, it's quite an experience. And I had the, I guess the privilege, if you want to call it that, to go to one of Dick's timing schools, and I'll tell you, there were times when I think he wanted to throw me out, because it was very difficult for me, the same way it would be for you, to change my older habits and try to call things on phrase. Well, what I do when I'm calling is I try to split phrase, use whatever sight timing, if you want to call it this, and if I have to throw in an extra up to the middle and back to hit a promenade or a four ladies chain or an Ella Man left on that beat one, then all the dancers seem to relax and really enjoy that part. So that's how it works for me. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what I had in mind.
Unfortunately, Bob, it doesn't fully answer that. Say I finally get a square together and I dance to one of my tapes, and I see that, yes, my timing is not good and needs some help. I already know that. It still doesn't answer how do I go about improving that timing. Elsie will use this mic because that one's not on the tape recorder. Yeah.
Bob has said much of what I was going to say. However, as I understand your question, Don, it is that how do you come out at the beginning of the phrase to start the actions on count one with 2 count figures? Well, my answer would be that you can't do it all the time. You have 2 count figures now, you have 6 count figures. However, figures should be divisible, I believe, by 2. And eventually, but not all the way through, like you're doing 8 count figures, as Dick was using as illustration, that you have to, you can't avoid hitting that number 1 beat. Because if you use 2 count figures, and figures that take 5 steps or 3 steps, you have to move them to 4 or to 5. Move it backwards or forwards depending on the experience of your dancers. But if it's divisible by 2, it will come out throughout that record. You'll be hitting that phrase correctly, and you will finish at the end of the record.
I know that dancing to the phrase is nice, but phrase timing and phrase dancing, dancing with a phrase, is independent, closely related, but independent to proper timing. By timing, I mean that I want to deliver my calls in time for the dancers to be able to flow smoothly from one call to the next, whether it happens to be on the phrase or not. I'd like it to be on the phrase. There's some tricks I can do to make it on the phrase sometimes, less often with contemporary dancing. But whether or not it's on the phrase or not, it can be properly timed or improperly timed. They can have the command at the right moment for moving to the next movement or not. And I want to know how I can, or actually as Don Beck, how I can teach others to deliver the call at the right moment so that they can move to the next call at the right time. And I contend that it is not by knowing how many beats it is and somehow miraculously counting and adding all these at the same time. You can, but it has to be by sight timing.
I don't think you keep track of me.
Oh, that's where you're going to pause it. This gentleman, I believe, would like to make a comment. Just state your name, please.
Clark Baker from Massachusetts. Actually, I have a bunch of questions this is brought up, and let's see if I can cover 1 or 2. The first question would be for Dick. If I wrote down and had you memorize a sequence that Don called it a typical mainstream dance, do you think you could call it on the phrase all the time, or can you only do that if the choreography is right?
If you pre-planned it, oh, sure.
No, he didn't pre-plan it. It's just something he called. I wrote it down on a piece of paper, gave it to you. You memorized it, and now you've got to call it well.
No, because now I would be in the same boat as he would have. I would have to depend on good dancing and movement.
So here's a point that has...
Triggering all like a computer. My mind isn't a computer. But if I were going to call the same style thing, if I were going to call the same thing, I would call them started on phrase. The one thing I noticed that even Nate, when you were singing, I had a hard time. You know, you were on number 5 some of the time, which is also a good movement beat, which felt great. But